And welcome back if you've just joined us for this rolling coverage of the special official funeral of the late Mama Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, who sadly left us on the 2nd of April, which of course was the Monday following the Easter break, that most pious and holiest of weeks in the Christian calendar. We know that she had attended that service in the church as well, just showing all the nuances and complexities of this woman that we knew as the mother of the nation, a freedom fighter, certainly a towering figure as a global icon in the struggle for liberation. And of course, those kinds of tributes have been pouring throughout the week. But one of the most captivating and interesting things which has unfolded over the past weeks is the changing of the narrative around Umama Winnie Madikizela-Mandela, who perhaps in the 80s and in the late 90s as well, there appeared to be a concerted effort to vilify her in the press for some of what had unfolded during the peak of that unrest. Seeing more revelations coming out this week that perhaps there had been deliberate attempts to sully her image. How has that story now been told? What have we learned from this exercise? I'm joined now for more on that, Shannon Ebrahim, and she is with Independent Media and is a global editor of that particular media group. Shannon, thank you so much for chatting to us. It's been certainly an extraordinary time. There was never a lack of interest in Winnie Mandela. She was captivating, she was fiery, she was strong, she was very striking, but the perceptions of her, or how her story was told, it was a binary of either saint or sinner. What was the role of the media in that?
The role of the media internationally and even in the country for the most part prior to 1994 was very negative. They painted Winnie Mandela as a criminal woman who was a blight on the South African nation. And I think what we learned this week, which was very interesting through the Winnie documentary that was aired for the first time on Wednesday, is that there had been a concerted attempt by Stratcom, Strategic Communications, and the security branch of South Africa at the time during the 1980s to ensure they vilify her character by any means necessary, and they had all the resources at their disposal. So what is particularly interesting is the director of Stratcom, Vic McPherson. He admits on the documentary that in the 1980s he was working with his friends at the top of the SABC to create a documentary film on Winnie Mandela that would ensure she was portrayed as a terrorist. And as a result of that, which was flighted in the late 80s, she was actually put on the international terrorist list of the United States. So when she makes her first trip to the United States with Madiba, they actually have to make a big deal about getting her a waiver to even get into the United States. And what I find interesting is that this narrative about her being a mugger, a shame on the country of South Africa, that continued right up until this week, to be quite honest. If you looked at most of the media headlines, even in the so-called progressive media in the United States and Britain, you would have largely negative headlines. But what is particularly interesting is that yesterday the US Congress honored Winnie Mandela, and for me that is an absolute coup. It means despite everything that the apartheid government threw at her and warped her reputation over all these decades, the day before we lay her to rest, the US Congress acknowledges that this was an incredible woman and an amazing leader, as did the United Nations Secretary General yesterday in a memorial service for her.
Certainly it does speak to her resilience, that none of these attempts to sully her name and reputation broke her. But I'm going to push you a little bit on the role of the media and perhaps some kind of responsibility that ought to be taken, because these revelations, some of them first came to light in 1995, if I recall that the Mail and Guardian did do this kind of report. What is it about those facts which are contained there which were not widely understood and I suppose percolated in our minds and digested by the broader South African public or internationally?
I think there was two things. One is the security branch did such an effective job of vilifying her at that time, and they had their own people placed in various newspapers. Even the editor of the Sunday Times at the time was working for the security branch, and I think that they bought that narrative. They were also paid to portray that image of Winnie Mandela, and I think that they were never critical and really interrogated the truth behind many of the allegations that were made about her. And the same with international international media. We even have this week Sky News in Australia saying that the ANC leadership we should all be scared of them for even eulogizing Mama Winnie. So that's the extent to which internationally the narrative hasn't changed that much in the media. But I think now this week has done a lot to change perceptions of who she really was, and the fact that she was not responsible for many of the things that she was accused of. And I think one of the most amazing facts that came out on 702 Radio this week was when Paul Erasmus said almost her entire football club were informers of the security branch. That is a huge revelation, because that really goes to the heart of what people were trying to say about her and what she did and what her role was. And I think we have some way to go to still rectifying the historical record on Winnie Mandela and showing her for the amazing woman that she was. But very importantly, as we put her to rest, I think the world is starting to realize that all the narrative that they had been fed was actually incorrect, and that this was an amazing woman. Unfortunately, today, the only international person we have at the funeral is Reverend Jesse Jackson, who is very close to her from the United States. The rest of the list are African presidents, vice presidents, and ministers. So perhaps it would have been nice to have more international dignitaries, but that will still take time for people to realize her contribution to the struggle.
All right. Thank you so much, Shannon, for that insight. It is indeed very interesting. We heard earlier, of course, from Pumla Williams that there is a large international delegation, mentioned Louis Farrakhan, as well as international models such as Naomi Campbell, and various delegations from across the continent, which speak, of course, of her stature and importance. Another crucial role that she played, whether it was within the party or within her own family and internationally as well, was that of being a negotiator, a unifier, bringing various elements, whether it was pockets of the EFF or the ANC. She could get them to sit around a table and converse. Such was the power of Umama Nomzamo Winnie Madikizela-Mandela.